Ever get that urge to, like, I don't know, peek into someone else's shopping cart?
Oh, okay.
Especially if it's, like, a really interesting shopping cart?
I guess. Depends on what's in it.
Okay, well, what if it was the UK government's shopping cart? And instead of groceries, they were buying cutting-edge tech.
Now you've got my attention. What are we talking about here?
We're diving into the UK's digital marketplace. That's where the government goes to buy all sorts of digital solutions.
Interesting. I've heard bits and pieces about it, but I'm definitely no expert.
Well, you're in the right place. We're going to untangle it all. And get this, they're buying everything from cloud hosting to, get this, load balancing services.
Load balancing services.
Yeah, it's pretty deep tech stuff, but by the end of this, you'll have a good handle on what the digital marketplace is, how it works, and why it even matters.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. Let's dive in.
Perfect. So, to really understand why this digital marketplace exists, we need to talk about innovation.
Right, because governments aren't always known for being on the cutting edge.
Exactly. But the UK is trying to change that. One of the things we uncovered that really stood out was this cloud-first policy they have.
Cloud first.
Yeah, basically it means they're prioritizing cloud-based solutions whenever they can.
Makes sense in today's world. But we can circle back to that cloud first thing, right? I feel like we need to take a step back. What exactly is the digital marketplace?
It's a great question. It's essentially a digital platform, right? And it connects public sector organizations in the UK with suppliers offering various digital services.
So instead of buying software or services the old-fashioned way, they have this online marketplace.
Exactly. And it's not just for the big government departments either.
Oh, really? So who else can use it?
We're talking agencies, local councils, you name it. Basically, if you're in the public sector, you can shop on the digital marketplace.
Wow, that's way more inclusive than I imagined. So it's about giving everyone access to the same digital tools, regardless of their size or budget.
You got it. And that's a game changer because it levels the playing field. A small council can get the same level of digital expertise as, say, a big ministry.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say I'm a local council, right? And I need a new digital service. Where do I even begin?
Okay, so the digital marketplace is structured around these things called frameworks. There are three main ones. Think of them like buckets.
Buckets?
Yeah, buckets of services.
Right.
You've got G-Cloud, digital outcomes and specialists, and Crown hosting data centers.
Okay, so it's not just one giant free market.
Yeah.
They're categories.
You got it. Each framework has its own focus. Like G-Cloud, that's the one-stop shop for anything cloud-related. You need cloud hosting, specialized software, even those load balancing services.
Right, right. And what if I need someone to build a website?
Yeah.
Or do some user research?
Different bucket. That's where digital outcomes and specialists comes in. That framework covers a whole range of services like development, user research, even accessibility audits. They want to make sure those services are available to everyone.
Makes sense. Okay, and I'm guessing Crown hosting data centers is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, they need physical data centers for certain things, but there's a catch.
Oh, what's that?
Remember that cloud-first policy we mentioned?
This is where it gets interesting, isn't it? Tell me more. So it's like they have the option for physical data centers, but they'd much rather everyone just go with the cloud if they can.
Exactly. It's a clear signal that UK government is serious about this whole cloud thing. They really see it as the future of their digital infrastructure.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah,
It's more flexible, often more cost-effective.
absolutely. But so far, we've only looked at one side of the coin here. We've talked about what the government is buying, but what about the companies and people actually providing these digital services?
Right. What's it like to be on the other side of that transaction?
Instead of adding things to the cart, you're the one stocking the shelves, so to speak.
I can imagine for businesses with the right products or services, this digital marketplace could be a pretty big opportunity.
Talk about a potential client base, the UK government. So let's say you're a tech company, maybe a startup, or even just a freelancer with some in-demand skills. What's it take to get involved?
Well, our trusty gov.uk guidance document actually breaks it down to two main categories of suppliers. You've got your cloud-based services,
Okay, that makes sense.
and then you have your digital specialist services.
I like how they've made that distinction there, and it really shows just how broad this marketplace really is. Can you give us some specific examples of what kinds of things fall under each category?
Sure. So for cloud-based services, you're talking about things like accounting software. But not just any accounting software. It's got to be the kind that's specifically designed for the way government agencies work,
Right, makes sense.
Or think back to those load balancing services we mentioned earlier. Essentially anything you could deliver through the cloud, whether it's software, platforms,
Right.
even infrastructure itself.
Got it. And what about the digital specialists? What are they offering?
This is where it gets really interesting. Think about all the expertise that goes into making digital services work. You might have user experience designers who can make government websites more citizen-friendly,
Oh, I can think of a few government websites that could use their help.
right? Or data analysts who can help agencies make sense of all the data they collect. Even just individual developers with very specific, in-demand coding skills. In fact, the document even mentions user research studios as an example, which gives you an idea of just how niche some of these services can be.
I love that because it means the government isn't just stuck with these big, clunky IT contracts anymore. They can actually go out and find the exact expertise they need, even if it's from a one-person shop.
Exactly. It's about agility, finding the right people for the job, no matter how big or small the supplier is.
Hmm.
Now, one important thing to note, whether you're offering cloud services or you're a digital specialist, you can't just start selling your services on the digital marketplace.
Right, there's got to be some process, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
You have to apply to be a part of the framework that fits what you're offering. And the thing is, these applications aren't always open. They operate on a sort of periodic basis.
So it's not a free-for-all. There's some structure, some control over who can participate.
Exactly. It ensures everyone's on a level playing field,
Mhm.
that the government has a chance to vet everyone properly, make sure they're only partnering with high-quality providers. Although, having said that, I did notice on the gov.uk website that both the G-Cloud and the digital outcomes and specialist frameworks are actually closed for applications right now.
Oh, interesting. So the window of opportunity isn't always open, but there is a system in place for when it is.
Exactly. And knowing that, I bet some of our listeners might be thinking, okay, I have this amazing service. I'm ready to apply. What should I do? What advice would you give them?
Well, I'd say preparation is key. Just because the frameworks are closed right now doesn't mean you can't get a head start.
I like that. So what does that preparation look like?
I think the most important thing is to really understand the application process. What are they looking for? What are the specific requirements for each framework?
And that's where those guidance documents we keep mentioning come in handy, right?
100%. They're like your roadmap. Because remember, the digital marketplace, they really put a strong emphasis on transparency, on making sure everything is clear and easy to follow.
Which makes sense. It builds trust when everyone knows the rules of the game.
Exactly. They lay everything out from who's eligible to apply, what the application process looks like, even things like contract terms, pricing guidelines. It's all right there. It's like having a handbook for the entire ecosystem.
And that's so important, don't you think? Because it levels the playing field.
Yeah.
Whether you're a huge corporation or a small startup, you have access to the same information, the same opportunities.
Right. And it comes back to that theme of accessibility we talked about earlier. They've really tried to make this something that anyone can participate in.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground here, different frameworks, the application process, all that good stuff. But for me, one of the things that really stands out is just how important they've made these guidance documents.
It's true. And it would be easy to dismiss them as just another piece of bureaucracy, but they actually play a really crucial role in making this whole digital marketplace thing work. They really do. It's easy to think, oh, more documents, but they actually make the whole thing much more accessible, don't you think?
I completely agree. You know, it makes me think of this one time I was working with this local council, and they were really struggling to get this new digital service off the ground.
Oh, yeah.
They had a bad experience with the old way of doing procurement, lots of red tape, hidden costs, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So they were a bit hesitant about the digital marketplace at first, like, is this going to be another headache? But having those guides, having it all spelled out clearly, step by step, it made a huge difference for them.
It gave them the confidence to actually use the system.
Exactly. They could see what they needed to do, what the government expected, and they ended up finding the perfect solution for their needs.
That's a great example of how these guides can have a real impact, It's one thing to have a platform, a set of rules, but it's another thing entirely to provide that support, that guidance that helps everyone feel confident using it.
Couldn't agree more. And again, it goes back to transparency and accessibility, which are kind of the cornerstones of the digital marketplace.
For sure. So as we wrap up here, I gotta say, I'm walking away with more questions than answers. In a good way, of course. Like, it feels like we've only scratched the surface.
Right. Like with this whole cloud-first thing,
Yeah.
it's ambitious,
Yeah.
right? Pushing for cloud-based solutions whenever possible.
Mhm.
But it makes you wonder, what are the potential downsides? What challenges might pop up down the road?
Totally. Things like security, vendor lock-in, those are big questions that we probably need to unpack another time.
Totally.
And for anyone listening who's now raring to go, thinking, all right, I've got my amazing digital service, time to apply to the digital marketplace. Well, we know the frameworks are closed right now, so what should they be doing in the meantime?
That's the question, isn't it? Well, I would say you can never be too prepared, right?
Right.
So start digging into those frameworks. What are the specific requirements for each one? Do your offerings align with the government's digital priorities? Maybe even reach out to some companies already on the marketplace. See if they have any advice.
Great tips. It's all about being proactive. Well, I think it's safe to say we've only just dipped our toes into the world of the UK's digital marketplace, but hopefully you, listening out there, have a better sense of what it is, how it works, and why it's kind of a big deal.
It's definitely more than just a procurement platform, that's for sure.
Totally. It's about innovation, transparency, and making sure the government has access to the best digital solutions out there. So whether you're a tech enthusiast, a policy wonk, or just curious about the future of government services, I'd say the digital marketplace is definitely worth a closer look. You might even be inspired to join the party yourself one day.